Also, today we are going to understand different type of keys that are present in the database, and keys are a part of constraints. So basically we can say that overall we are going to understand what are different types of constraints that are available in our SQL database. Okay, so in our previous video we created a table called student with the following fields, and then if we try to fetch all the details of the table, this is what we were getting. Now, first thing that we are going to see is what is null. So if we don't give any value, default thing that we are going to get is null. Let's try to insert one record with not giving a value to the field name. Okay, insert into student, then we'll give the column names, which is not required but it is recommended. Name, okay, let's not give anything name, age and gender. Okay, and the values for them will be, let's give it as 7. Name we are not giving, next is age 12, then gender female. Right, if we execute this, invalid column, okay, that is a varchar, so we should write it under a single quote. Now if we will execute, we can see that for name we are going to get the null. Now let's try to fetch all the records. So if you can see, since we didn't give anything for name, we are getting null. So if the constraints that we keep on the table, saying that if we want to store a record in the table, and these are the constraints that before inserting those constraints will be verified. Okay, so we are going to see what are the different kinds of constraints and how we are going to make use of them one by one. But the complete concept behind the constraints is before inserting something or before adding a new record in the table, it should pass all the constraints, that is restrictions. If it is saying that we cannot uh, insert any record in the student table without giving name, then we should provide that under constraints. So that was just an example. Now let's see what are different constraints that are available. Then we are going to create a new table following those constraints, and then we'll try to insert new records. Okay, so the first constraint is a not null constraint. Now what happened here is, in while creating table we said that there will be a field whose name will be the name and whose data type will be the and varchar. Okay, but we didn't provided any constraint saying it should not be null or it should be only of uh, any other stuff. Okay, but we never mentioned that it should be present. So by default it will consider that even if nothing is provided to me, I will insert null in place of that. Okay, so we'll try to create that in parallel. So this will be our new table, create table student, student. Let's give student constraint student. Okay, constraint. Okay, constraint student. Okay, this seems to be a keyword. Okay, let's give const student. Fine. Now let's open and close to mention our field name and its data types, and we'll close this. Now I'm entering this and we'll mention one by one. First we'll mention ID, which is a numeric. Then we have name, which is nvarchar of size 30. And then we have something called gen. Okay, and let's I didn't find it much useful, so we'll skip the gender and we'll add age, which is of type int. Then we'll have something called lucky number. Okay, lucky number, and it will be of type int again. Now in the name I want to say that it should never be null, so I'll simply add not null. That is, if I didn't give any variable or any value to the name, and if I try to save the record, it will not save. It will give me an error saying I cannot store this until unless you provide me the name, because this constraint is not satisfied if I don't give any value. Okay. Now previously we saw that when we had this table, and if I try to execute again this thing, okay, let's give it something called 3. And if I try to insert one more record with the ID as 3, and if I fetch all the records in the student, you can see that we assume that ID will be the unique attribute which will uniquely identify each record. But if I can see there are two students whose IDs are 3. So I want to make it as a primary key, saying that it will, what I can say, no value will be repeated again and again. So for that, what I can do is I can say primary key. I'm adding a primary key for this table on column ID. So for this table, my primary key will be, let's remove this as well, on incorrect syntax, let me remove. Okay, so on the constant student constrained student table, I'm keeping primary key constraint on the column ID, so there will be no value which will be repeated again for the ID. Okay, so that was our primary key constraint. Now there is one more thing called unique key constraint. So if I want, the unique key is again same as that of primary key, saying that the same value will not be repeated again. But the difference between the unique key and primary key is it will allow null for once. Okay, because when first time null is been included, it is again unique. But the second time when null is inserted, then it is not unique. So unique key will allow null, but primary key will not allow null. Then we have some concept for indexing, which is out of scope of this video, but basically indexing is done on certain columns based on which number of searches happens very frequently. So index allows us to do the sorting quickly and fetch the results very quickly. So then inside indexing we have subcategories which are clustered and unclustered. So primary key does the clustered index over the column, and unique key does the unclustered index on the column. Now what is this indexing? That is a different concept that we will look in later on, but as of now you just understand that it will allow null once, but it will but primary key will not allow. Okay, so let's say, what is this, unique key. So let's give which one? Okay, let's give lucky number as unique key. That doesn't make sense. Okay, let's give name as unique key. So basically, try to understand the concept behind this. Otherwise, like you can use it as per your requirement. So we'll try to add unique key for name. Okay, but again we need to understand. Okay, let's add unique for age. UNIQUE. Okay, so I'm saying that age will be unique, but it is not a primary key, means for once I can add a null in the column as well. Okay, so that was about a unique key. Then the default constraints is, for suppose if uh, a lucky number is to be provided, but if someone is not providing me with the lucky number, then I'll have some default number that is to be inserted if no one is providing me with the lucky number. So default I will keep it as 7. Okay, so if no one is inserting a value of lucky number, the default will be 7. That will be inserted. Now, okay, so that was about default constraint. Now the final constraint that we are going to cover is a check constraint. So when inserting into the record or inserting into the table, we are going to check whether a certain condition is met or not. If it is not met, we will not allow that record to be saved under table. So let's say we are going to make sure that the age of the children who is taking admission, or who is joining any institution, his age is greater than equal to 5. He should be greater than or equal to 5. So this we may need to make sure check. Okay, check age is greater than equal to 5. So here, yeah, this is fine. Now here, if we try to uh, create this table, Okay, const student table. Okay, it is created successfully. Now let's try to fetch everything that is there inside constant student. So you can see ID, name, age, lucky number. Okay, now if I try to insert into that table saying ID, age, gender. Okay, next is my, let's add name and then age, and okay, instead of gender we have lucky number. Okay, so my id will be, let's give it as 1. Remember, id is a primary key, then name is something, name is our varchar and it is not null, so I cannot. Okay, let's not give anything to the name and see what is the error that we will get. But age, let's give age as 10 and lucky number as 5. Okay, so we are seeing if we try to insert this, we are not providing any name value, so we should get some error because we said that it should not be null, and if you are not giving, it will be null. So let's execute this. So you can see cannot insert the value null into column name, so we need to provide name. Now let's give this name as, in single quote, person 1. Okay, so this comma means we are separating the values. Now if we try to insert now, let's execute it, inserted perfectly. Now let's try to fetch all the records in that table. You can see we got this. There's a record whose id is this, name and all this. Now if we try to execute this again, okay, it will say violation of a primary key constraint, cannot insert a duplicate key. So how it is saying this record is duplicate? Not because this or this or this, it is saying duplicate key based on the id. Okay, so if I keep the complete thing same as it is, but I say 2, it will be inserted. Okay, so primary key is satisfied because we are changing this. But if you see, there is one more issue here. The issue is this unique. Age should never be repeated. So let's say this is 1. But here we are saying uh, violation because of the primary key value. Now if we try to insert, okay, so now we will fetch all the records, execute. So if you see, now we tried to manipulate the primary key and we got the violation error. Then we tried to manipulate the name by not providing anything, so we got issue 1 again. Now let's try to insert one more record by having age as, this age is third parameter, so we'll include age as 4. So if you try to say now, we are trying to violate this constraint, so we should get one more error saying we are violating a specific check because the check constraint was violated. So this is also working fine. Now let's change the age value as 7, and then we have something as lucky number default. Now let's check this. So if we don't provide the lucky number, okay, we'll remove the lucky number and we are not providing any value here. Now if we try to execute this, our lucky number should be the default value, which is 7. So now let's try to fetch all that again, execute. So you can see 7 is assigned by default. So that's how we worked on, we came across primary key, unique key and default constraint. Okay, so there is one more thing that I want to show, which is that if I'll drop the table once, drop table const student. Okay, so I am dropping this. I hope these keys are clear and these keys constraints are clear so far. Now I'll try to remove this check constraint just to show the difference between the unique and primary key. Now I'll try to execute this. Okay. Now if I try to fetch all the records, you can see I am getting everything with no content as though as it is a new table, right? So here if I try to, because I removed the check constraint here, if I don't provide any age, okay, if I don't provide any age, the it should insert the null value. So one row is affected. Now we'll try to fetch all the queries, you can see lucky age is null. So default value was 7, so 7 is assigned. But if I try to execute one more, okay, with a different ID. So now again since I'm not providing anything to age, it should add null. But if it is adding null, then it is violating the constraint of unique. So this time I should get an exception saying that I'm violating the unique constraint. So you can see cannot insert a duplicate. The duplicate value is null. So here it is trying to insert null, which is not possible. So that is the difference between primary key and unique key. Apart from that, we have difference in terms of indexing. So that we will see later on. So one more major key that we didn't cover in this part, which was a foreign key. Okay, so because that is really crucial key and which is very important, so it will again a time consuming concept, so we'll cover that in a different video. But apart from foreign key, if you have any queries so far with respect to keys or constraint, you can write down in the comment section. Thank you.